Welcome to the Sleepy Journeys Through Famous Figures podcast, your sanctuary to learn while you sleep. My name's Jack, and I'm so happy to have you here with me. Tonight we're going to embark on a gentle journey through the grace of Queen Elizabeth II. Settle in now. Let your body grow heavy and still as the world outside begins to hush. Picture yourself beneath a quiet night sky, stars just beginning to shimmer softly in the distance. A faint breeze whispers through the trees, and everything slows to a gentle rhythm. Tonight, we'll drift through time to walk alongside a figure known to so many, yet wrapped in an aura of quiet dignity, Queen Elizabeth II. She reigned for over 70 years, not through force or thunder, but through steady grace, calm purpose, and the patient strength of consistency. Hers was a presence felt like the ticking of a reliable clock, always there, quietly marking the passage of time. While the world around her shifted and surged, she remained, poised and unwavering, a soft beacon of duty and serenity. Tonight, we will not rush. We'll meander gently through the moments that shaped her, the seasons that passed within her long life, and the subtle poetry of a monarch who found power not in loud words, but in gentle example. From her childhood days under the dappled sun of the royal gardens, to the solemn hush of her coronation, and onward through decades of transformation, each moment a step in the quiet legacy she built. Imagine the soft rustle of silk gowns, the subtle gleam of a crown beneath golden light. Imagine walking with her along the gravel paths of Balmoral, where the mist hangs low and the air smells faintly of pine. There, in solitude and simplicity, a queen found rest. In public, her steps were always composed, her voice measured, her gaze calm. Yet behind all that, a life unfurled, a daughter, a mother, a leader, a woman. As we journey, you may find yourself relaxing deeper with each step. Let the soft rhythm of her story quiet your thoughts, much like the hush of a distant ocean tide. This is not a tale of drama or intrigue. It is a lullaby of service, a lullaby of grace. Let your breath slow, in and out. You are safe here, in this quiet space of remembrance. We will begin with her early years, a young princess born not for the throne, but to find herself unexpectedly at its center. Even then, a quiet sense of duty shimmered beneath her playful smile. And so, with the night stretching gently around us, we begin our soft walk through the life of Queen Elizabeth II, a journey not of grandeur, but of subtle strength, a life not shouted, but lived with enduring poise. Let us begin. She was born on a cool spring day, April 21st, 1926, beneath the soft rustle of London's awakening trees. The world, unknowingly, welcomed a child who would come to define constancy for nearly a century. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor entered the world not in a palace, but in a modest townhome at 17 Bruton Street in Mayfair, a detail that itself echoed her future tone. Royal, yes, but rooted in calm simplicity. The world she was born into was post-war and pre-turbulence, nestled in that narrow space between upheavals. Britain still breathed in the rhythms of empire, its global reach expansive, but the soil of the 20th century was shifting beneath its polished shoes. Into this came Elizabeth, Lilibet, to her family, a quiet, observant child with light eyes and an early stillness. Her father, Prince Albert, Duke of York, was never intended for kingship, and in those early years, neither was she poised for the throne. The throne, at the time, was occupied by her grandfather, King George III. Her uncle David, the future King Edward VIII, stood first in the line of succession. This positioning meant her childhood unfolded free from the weight of direct expectation, yet steeped in royal rhythms all the same. Mornings for young Elizabeth began gently. She was educated at home, under the watchful eye of her governess, Marion Crawford, and her mother, Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. Her lessons were broad, but not rushed. History, literature, religion, and etiquette all flowed together like sunlight through tall windows. No sternness marked her learning. It was tender and cultivated with care, more a blossoming than a drilling. She spent long hours playing with her younger sister, Margaret, whose liveliness often counterbalanced Elizabeth's quiet focus. The two girls would drift through the gardens, make-believing and dancing, their laughter caught by hedgerows and carried over palace lawns. Horses became a passion early. Elizabeth adored riding, and the bond between girl and pony was instinctual, quiet, and deeply cherished. There was music too, gramophone lullabies and piano melodies that echoed softly through royal halls. The household was formal but not cold, rooted in duty, yet warm with affection. Her parents, especially her father, were deeply devoted. She watched him wrestle with public life, his stammer softening only through immense effort. In his quiet perseverance, she found a model, strength through gentleness, leadership through quiet resolve. Holidays were spent at Balmoral in Scotland, where dew-laced mornings gave way to long, misty walks and picnics in glens. There, she breathed in nature's calm and found a comfort in its unchanging rhythms. The damp earth, the scent of moss, the sound of streams, all whispered peace into her childhood, and later, her reign. Though she was still a child, the threads of her future role began weaving together almost invisibly. Her temperament, serious, thoughtful, and measured, was noted by family and staff alike. Even then, she held herself with a presence that felt older than her years. Her small voice, when she spoke, carried a clarity that would echo across history. In those early years, Elizabeth lived a life that was both ordinary and extraordinary. No one yet knew she would one day wear the crown, not even she. But the light of something steady had already begun to glow within her, soft as candlelight, unshaken by the world outside. The soft tapestry of childhood gave way to the steady drumbeat of history, and with it, Elizabeth's world began to change. The year was 1939. War clouds loomed thick across Europe, and Britain once again found itself on the edge of global conflict. Elizabeth was just 13 years old when the Second World War began, a poised teenager in a world suddenly shadowed by uncertainty. Even then, she met the shifting times not with fear, but with an ever-deepening calm. Her early adolescence, shaped as it had been by quiet learning and family closeness, now unfolded under the strain of blackouts, rations, and radio bulletins. Though shielded from the worst of the conflict's devastation, she felt its presence in every quiet corridor of Windsor Castle, where the royal family had retreated for safety. The castle, with its stone walls and vast, echoing halls, became both sanctuary and schoolhouse. While the bombs fell on London, Elizabeth and Margaret continued their lessons, but the world outside pressed closer with every passing month. In 1940, a turning point arrived. At just 14, Elizabeth gave her first public address, broadcast over the BBC's Children's Hour. Her voice, soft and clear, drifted across the airwaves to reach children who had been evacuated from cities, separated from family, scattered across unfamiliar places. "We are trying to do all we can to help our gallant sailors, soldiers, and airmen," she said gently. "And we are trying, too, to bear our own share of the danger and sadness of war." It was a moment both symbolic and sincere. The nation, frightened and uncertain, listened to the future queen speak not as a sovereign, but as a fellow child. Her empathy shone through, not performative, but authentic. Even then, she understood the comfort of a composed voice. As the war stretched on, Elizabeth's sense of service deepened. By 1945, now nearing adulthood, she expressed a firm desire to contribute directly to the war effort. The government hesitated, protective of her symbolic role, but she persisted with quiet determination. And so, in the spring of that year, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army. There, she trained as a driver and mechanic, Princess Elizabeth, covered in oil, fixing engines beneath the open sky. It was a gesture more than a necessity, but it was a meaningful one. The people saw her, and in her overalls and cap, they saw not just royalty, but solidarity. She earned her stripes not through command, but through participation. That experience shaped her deeply. It gave her a taste of independence, of discipline, and of service not as spectacle, but as shared duty. The war, in all its sorrow and hardship, became a crucible of identity. When the war ended and celebrations broke out across the country, Elizabeth slipped anonymously into the crowds of London, arm in arm with Margaret, to join the joy. For one brief evening, she was not the heir or the princess, just a young woman among many, laughing and dancing in the floodlit streets. She returned from the war years not hardened, but steadied, The shadows had not dimmed her, but refined her. In the quiet trials of wartime, her sense of duty became personal. It no longer belonged to tradition alone, it belonged to her. The seeds of queenship had been quietly sown. The air was warm and still in Kenya on the evening of February 5th, 1952. Elizabeth, now 25, had arrived just days earlier with her husband, Prince Philip, on what was to be a goodwill tour through the Commonwealth. The land around her pulsed with life. Cicadas humming, distant trees rustling, and the sunset burning quietly across the African sky. It was here, high atop the treetops at Treetops Lodge, that her life would shift irrevocably. She had gone to sleep as a princess. She would awaken as a queen. Back in England, her father, King George VI, had passed away during the night. His health, though fragile, had not suggested such immediacy. The news was broken with careful solemnity. In a place far from home, among the whispering wilds of another continent, Elizabeth received the weight of the crown. There was no grandeur in the moment, no trumpets or formal procession, only stillness. The message was delivered, and a hush seemed to settle across everything. For a time, she stood in silence, absorbing what had changed and what now must begin. Her gaze was steady, her breath quiet. In the space of a single heartbeat, the girl who had once played with ponies on palace lawns was now sovereign of a vast realm. The journey back to Britain was swift, but steeped in reverence. Aboard the aircraft, her thoughts were unreadable, her face calm, though her heart surely stirred with loss and responsibility. Philip sat beside her, silent and present. Behind her, the young years fell away. Ahead, a lifetime of duty stretched out, shaped by no one's design but fate's. Upon landing, the transition was nearly immediate. The Prime Minister, Winston Churchill himself, greeted her. And from that moment, she was no longer just Elizabeth Windsor, she was Queen Elizabeth II. Her name would now be spoken with ceremonial gravity, her every movement watched, her words weighed with global significance. Still, in her first steps, she carried herself not with command, but composure. Grief sat quietly on her shoulders, mingling with the early strains of responsibility. She wore the weight lightly, but surely. The days that followed were marked by a flurry of arrangements, meetings, advisors, protocols. Yet beneath it all remained the steady pulse of her temperament. She did not seek to fill the space with declarations or assertions. Instead, she moved with quiet resolve, letting her presence speak for itself. She chose to keep her name, Elizabeth. In doing so, she tied her identity as queen not to grandeur or invention, but to continuity. She would not shape her reign in her image, but she would carry the image of the crown forward with grace. And so, the world beheld its new monarch, not crowned yet, but already queen in spirit. A woman of 25, her expression reserved yet luminous with a sense of purpose, stepping calmly into the current of history. The crown had passed, not with spectacle, but with silence. Not in a blaze, but beneath the rustling leaves of the Kenyan highlands. And with that hush, the second Elizabethan age had begun. On a gentle June morning in 1953, the streets of London stirred with quiet anticipation. Rain had fallen in the early hours, misting the city in a cool silver sheen, as if the heavens had polished the stones in preparation. Beneath soft gray skies, people began to gather, lining the roads, clutching umbrellas and small Union flags, their breath visible in the morning chill. It was Coronation Day. Inside Westminster Abbey, centuries of memory breathed from every stone. The air was hushed, heavy with reverence. Candles flickered along vaulted archways. The scent of aged wood, fresh flowers, and burning incense mingled, creating an atmosphere both sacred and intimate. The great bells tolled their solemn rhythm, echoing through the abbey and far across the city. Elizabeth stood still. Her gown shimmered, embroidered with symbols of the Commonwealth: wheat for Canada, the lotus for India, the fern of New Zealand. It was a garment of peace, of quiet strength and unity. She was composed, her hands steady, her breath soft and even. As she moved slowly down the aisle, flanked by golden light and whispers of history, she did not stride with pomp or power. Her pace was gentle, ceremonial, as if every step carried not just her, but a tradition deeper than time. The service unfolded like a delicate ritual of memory. Words spoken echoed those of monarchs long past. The Archbishop of Canterbury moved with practiced calm, reading verses that had once graced the ears of Elizabeth Farmers and Victoria. Yet now, those same words seemed reborn, tender, youthful, spoken into the presence of a woman whose reign was just beginning. There was no thunderous moment, no loud declaration. The most sacred act of the coronation was also the most hidden, anointing. Behind a modest canopy, Elizabeth knelt. Her head bowed as oil, consecrated and perfumed, was gently traced upon her hands, chest, and forehead. In that stillness, beneath the cloth and candlelight, she was not only crowned by ritual, but sealed in quiet purpose. When she finally took the throne, the weight of the crown settled upon her with the ease of acceptance. The heavy St. Edward's crown, worn by monarchs for centuries, now rested atop a young woman whose poise carried it more lightly than gold should allow. The orb, the scepter, the ring, all placed with care, became symbols in her hands, not of power grasped, but of responsibility accepted. Around her, choirs sang softly, their harmonies rising like smoke through stained glass and old stone. Outside, as she emerged from the abbey, the clouds parted for a moment, casting a subtle glow upon the scene. The people cheered, not wildly, but warmly, with the kind of joy that rises from hope and affection. In homes across the nation, citizens gathered to watch on their television sets the first coronation broadcast live. In drawing rooms and parlors, teacups in hand, millions witnessed her quiet dignity from afar. It was history unfolding, not with fanfare, but with grace. That day, Queen Elizabeth II began her reign not with a command, but with a promise spoken in her gaze, a promise of presence, of steadiness, of devotion. The crown, ancient and gleaming, sat upon a head held high, but humbly. And in that gentle coronation, the quiet tone of a 70-year reign was set. In the quiet years that followed the coronation, Queen Elizabeth II stepped into a role that would span continents and generations. Britain, once the core of a global empire, was transforming. The echoes of war had not yet faded, yet new energies surged. Social movements, decolonization, and economic shifts all stirred the landscape. The world was becoming new again, and the monarchy, ancient and ceremonial, found itself standing at a crossroads. Through it all, Elizabeth did not attempt to halt the winds of change. She did not resist them, nor did she rush to meet them. Instead, she remained centered, a calm figure through the decades of acceleration, her presence acting like a quiet metronome amid a quickening world. The British Empire, once the largest in history, had begun to evolve into something new, a commonwealth of nations. Countries that had once been governed from afar now moved towards independence, self-rule, and self-identity. It could have been a moment of retreat, of severing ties, but under Elizabeth's reign, a softer vision emerged. She became not an imperial figure, but a symbolic one, head of the Commonwealth by mutual agreement, not decree. With her signature stillness, she helped nurture a bond based not on control, but on respect. The crown no longer commanded, it represented. And she, more than any legislation or policy, embodied that transformation. Her travels became gestures of this new understanding. She embarked on extensive state visits, often the first reigning monarch to set foot in newly independent nations. From the sun-drenched shores of the Caribbean to the quiet mountains of Papua New Guinea, she met presidents, prime ministers, and ordinary citizens with the same gentle attention. Her presence did not demand, it acknowledged. To the people of Ghana in 1961, she danced. In India, she laid wreaths. In Nigeria, she listened. Each visit was a quiet act of diplomacy, a conversation not held in words but in gesture. At home, Britain too was changing. The post-war years brought housing reform, public health initiatives, and shifting class structures. The monarchy could have appeared distant amidst these transitions, yet Elizabeth's steady visibility grounded it. She opened schools, toured factories, visited hospitals, not as spectacle, but as silent witness to the nation's evolution. Television brought her closer to her subjects than ever before. The image of the Queen was no longer reserved for special occasions. It lived in living rooms, framed by flickering screens and family chatter. She was no longer remote. She was ever present, a constant companion to a nation redefining itself. Through this period of turbulence and redefinition, Elizabeth remained unshaken. Her public image was not altered to meet each moment. Instead, it remained consistent, still, poised, and quietly engaged. She was not the voice of change, but the listener to it. Not the force of reform, but its witness. Her role was no longer to lead an empire. It was to offer steadiness to a community of nations, now linked not by authority, but by shared pasts and chosen futures. In a century filled with rupture, her consistency became a form of comfort. And as the world changed, Elizabeth did not proclaim relevance. She simply remained. And in her quiet endurance, she became the soft heart of a commonwealth that pulsed gently, yet persistently, onward. Though crowned in an age of quills and coronets, Queen Elizabeth II would come to reign through decades marked by invention and reinvention. The 20th century was an era of extraordinary speed, of satellites and supercomputers, shifting values and the sudden bloom of global media. And yet, through this whirlwind of modernity, she remained timeless, graceful, and quietly receptive. Her relationship with the modern world was not one of loud embrace, nor of stubborn resistance. Rather, she met each transformation with the same calm that had always defined her, a steady acknowledgement of the world's forward motion. In her own way, she allowed modernity to move around her, like a stream adjusting to the presence of an anchored stone. It began early. Her coronation in 1953 became the first of its kind to be televised. It was not an idea welcomed easily by the establishment, who feared that broadcasting such a sacred rite would diminish its dignity. But Elizabeth approved it. She saw not intrusion, but connection. She understood, even then, that monarchy in the modern age could not hide behind veils. It needed to be present, familiar, even when solemn. In the decades that followed, she navigated a rising tide of public attention with quiet agility. The press changed. Journalism became louder, less deferential. Headlines grew bolder. Yet she never responded with confrontation. She remained serene, never offering scandal, never inviting spectacle. Her silence, deliberate and unwavering, became a kind of shield. Technological change crept into every corridor of British life, and the monarchy too was touched by it. She sent her first email in 1976, a quiet act of curiosity rather than fanfare. She adapted gently, letting others announce the novelty while she continued her work with the same careful grace. Later came the internet, and with it, a world now capable of watching every gesture in real time. Yet she did not alter herself to suit the camera. She remained herself, allowing technology to frame her, but never define her. Social change, too, coursed through her reign. The values of the 1960s, freedom, expression, upheaval, stood in contrast to the formality of royal tradition. And yet she never imposed her judgment. In her speeches, there were no critiques of culture, no resistance to progress. Only observations, encouragements, acknowledgments of the present moment. She did not seek to steer society. She stood quietly at its edge, a lighthouse rather than a rudder. Even in matters of monarchy, she permitted gentle transformation. She adjusted rules of succession. She permitted increased transparency. She embraced a more casual presence when needed, appearing in bright coats rather than regal robes, walking among school children, chatting with the public at garden parties. Always with a gloved wave, always with poise. The younger generations of the royal family, more attuned to social media and modern celebrity, sometimes moved faster, sometimes stumbled. Still, she remained above the fray, a quiet constant amid the noise, never interfering, never overshadowing. Her power came not from innovation, but from steadiness in the face of it. She did not chase modernity. She allowed it. And in doing so, she created a bridge between the past and the present, between parchment and pixel, carriage and camera. Through each new age, she walked without hurry, without resistance. The world around her changed its pace, but she never lost hers. And so, in her presence, many found a quiet reassurance that even as everything transforms, some things, dignity, grace, stillness, can remain. Behind palace walls and beyond the formalities of state, Queen Elizabeth II held roles that were deeply human, roles far from the ceremonial, those of mother, grandmother, and eventually great-grandmother. In these relationships, she was not the sovereign, but simply mummy, granny, and later, Gangan. Though the world knew her as a monarch, her family knew her in much quieter ways. Motherhood came to her early in her reign. Prince Charles was born in 1948, when Elizabeth was still a princess. Princess Anne followed in 1950. The younger sons, Andrew and Edward, came in the 1960s, by which time Elizabeth was firmly settled into queenship. Her early years as a mother were marked by balancing tradition with the emerging responsibilities of a modern monarch. Royal life, though enveloped in privilege, was also structured and demanding. Public duty called often, and long tours frequently pulled her away from her young children. It was a reality of her time and of her role, but it stirred commentary even then. Still, her affection was deep and enduring, expressed not in display, but in steady presence when she was home. Photographs from those years reveal tenderness. Elizabeth seated on the lawn with her children, walking hand in hand beside a young Charles, gently smiling down at Anne during an afternoon outing. Her maternal love, though quiet, was visible in these unguarded moments, moments that slipped past protocol and became personal. As her children grew, she gave them space to become individuals, to make choices, and, sometimes mistakes, on the public stage. Her restraint became a form of respect. She rarely commented, even as public life scrutinized the personal struggles within her family. When grandchildren came, first with Prince William and Prince Harry, later with Peter and Zara Phillips, and others to follow, her presence became even more tender. With age came a softening in rhythm, more time for walks in the gardens of Balmoral, more laughter during Christmas at Sandringham, more joy in the innocence of childhood around her once more. Her relationship with her grandchildren was often described as warm and affectionate, but never overbearing. She offered gentle guidance, shared stories, and provided a living thread to the past. Through her, they could glimpse the great sweep of history, not through textbooks or documentaries, but through quiet afternoon conversations over tea or soft glances exchanged during state events. Even in the public eye, these relationships glimmered softly. A small smile at a wedding, a proud gaze at a graduation, a loving touch on a balcony overlooking a waving crowd. Each gesture, subtle, yet filled with meaning. Later, as great-grandchildren arrived, her circle of family widened once more. Gan, as Prince George affectionately called her, was no longer just the head of state. She was the matriarch of a growing, evolving dynasty. Though the world saw her in grand processions and formal portraits, her family knew her as the quiet center of their world, a presence that remained calm in both celebration and storm. She did not offer opinion often, but when she did, it was listened to, respected, and remembered. And so, even as the crown gleamed above her, Elizabeth's greatest legacy may have been held not in gold or orb, but in the gentle way she stood at the heart of her family, steadfast, loving, and always quietly near. Each morning, the Queen began her day with a rhythm so precise it could have marked time itself. The red boxes would arrive, locked, official, filled with correspondence from ministers, reports from the Commonwealth, and matters of state that required her review. No matter the weather, the headlines, or her personal circumstances, she read them all. It was her duty, and she fulfilled it quietly, without spectacle, every single day of her reign. In the realm of public service, Queen Elizabeth II was the embodiment of constancy. Her schedule was a tapestry of ribbon cuttings, garden parties, state dinners, and ceremonial processions. Yet through them all, she moved not as a performer, but as a symbol. She was not the center of attention. She was the stillness at the center of attention. At formal events, her wave was modest, her voice rarely raised. She did not dazzle or entertain. Instead, she reassured. Where others might have tried to reinvent monarchy to suit modern tastes, she chose instead to reinforce its quiet purpose, ceremony, stability, and tradition. In doing so, she offered a kind of gentle permanence to a world otherwise in flux. Though seen by millions, Elizabeth herself remained somewhat unknowable. Her public persona was carefully maintained, not distant, but deliberately composed. She believed deeply in the separation between her personal life and her public role. To the Queen, monarchy was not a platform for individual expression. It was a service, a stewardship, a promise made visible through unwavering decorum. She rarely gave interviews. Her personal opinions remained private. What she thought about politics, culture, or change was never publicly stated. That silence to some seemed mysterious. But it was not born of secrecy. It was born of a belief that the sovereign should rise above the noise, providing unity, not division. In that silence, she became a kind of mirror. People projected their hopes and values upon her. To some, she was a conservative anchor. To others, a subtle progressive force through her quiet adaptability. She spoke little, but she meant much. Her Christmas broadcasts offered rare glimpses into her thoughts, carefully written, warmly delivered, but always measured. She spoke of kindness, community, faith, and resilience. Her words were soft, never inflammatory, and always chosen to uplift. Behind the scenes, those who worked with her spoke of her intelligence and dry wit, her memory for names and faces, and her ability to grasp nuance. She listened more than she spoke, absorbed more than she offered, and moved with a rhythm dictated not by ego, but by role. She was photographed thousands of times, appeared in every major newspaper for decades, and yet she never seemed overexposed. Because for all her public appearances, she guarded her essence. What the public saw was a composed figure who arrived on time, stood with grace, and spoke only when needed. This balance, of visibility without vulnerability, of presence without intrusion, was her true mastery. It allowed her to serve without becoming a spectacle. It allowed her to lead without demanding attention. In the quiet space between ceremony and substance, Elizabeth built a life of profound influence, an influence carried not by words shouted, but by words withheld, not by asserting herself, but by allowing herself to become part of something older, greater, and steadier than any one individual. And so, in the calm between the pageantry and the press, the Queen fulfilled her calling, not as a celebrity, not as a politician, but as a living symbol of something quietly enduring. Across the decades, Queen Elizabeth II became one of the most widely traveled heads of state in history. Her journeys were not marked by flourish or political grandstanding. They were quiet acts of presence, gestures of diplomacy rendered in calm and carefully considered steps. With each visit, she carried not just the name of Britain, but the weight of centuries, and yet she bore it all with her signature grace. From bustling capitals to remote villages, she walked gently across the world's stage. The click of her heels on palace floors, the rustle of silk in foreign air, the carefully chosen words spoken in a dozen tongues, all composed a portrait of diplomacy that was as understated as it was enduring. Her first major overseas tour as queen took her to the Commonwealth, a circuit of countries with deep historical ties to the United Kingdom. In Australia and New Zealand, the crowds swelled into the millions. People waited along dusty roads and modern boulevards for a glimpse of her. And when she appeared, gloved hand raised, smile faint but warm, there was a shared sense of witnessing something not grandiose, but quietly historic. She never approached these visits with imposition. Instead, she listened. She learned the customs, honored the traditions, accepted offerings with humility, and adapted her presence to each culture with a gentleness that made her feel familiar, even in distant lands. In Ghana in 1961, a country on the threshold of Cold War influence, her decision to dance with President Kwame Nkrumah became a symbol. It was not just a moment of diplomacy, it was a moment of recognition, of equality, of mutual respect. Her steps on the dance floor, swaying in rhythm with her host, spoke volumes without a single statement. She visited Germany in 1965, the first British monarch to do so since the end of the Second World War. There, she walked with quiet dignity through a nation still healing from conflict, her presence a symbol of reconciliation rather than domination. The crowds welcomed her not with wary eyes, but with sincere interest. She came not as a relic of empire, but as a messenger of peace. From India to Canada, Kenya to Korea, Elizabeth's state visits wove a network of silent influence. Her consistency and sincerity offered assurance. She represented continuity, not command. And in that, she built bridges that diplomacy alone could not span. At each stop, she was welcomed with ceremony, guard formations, floral garlands, stately dinners. Yet she never appeared aloof. She moved through it all with quiet curiosity, engaging with students, artisans, dignitaries, and citizens with equal respect. Her presence was formal, but never distant. Even in tense climates, her demeanor remained unchanged. She did not react to controversy. She did not offer unsolicited views. Her power lay in her ability to embody calm, to be a presence that reassured by simply being. Though she had no official role in setting foreign policy, her visits often softened diplomatic edges, opened conversations, and brought attention to relationships that needed nurturing. She did not persuade, she personified. In a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, Elizabeth's impact came through restraint. Her travels were not tours of triumph, but pilgrimages of goodwill. And over time, those pilgrimages wove a tapestry of quiet connection across the globe. She was not just Britain's queen. She became a symbol recognized far beyond its borders. A constant visitor whose respect for others earned their respect in return. Queen Elizabeth II spoke many times during her reign, through addresses, speeches, and greetings. Yet perhaps her most powerful form of communication was not through words at all, but through presence, ritual, and careful silence. Hers was a language built on subtlety, a glance, a pause, a perfectly timed gesture. In this unspoken dialect of diplomacy, she was fluent. Every detail of her appearance, every tilt of her head, every moment of stillness was intentional. Her decorum did not distance her. It defined her. In a world that often demanded reaction, she offered reflection. At state banquets, she would rise slowly, crystal glass in hand, and deliver speeches that were brief, gracious, and devoid of controversy. She praised cultures, honored shared history, and always emphasized peace and continuity. Her voice, calm and unwavering, could make a room of hundreds feel hushed and intimate. But it was the time between words that spoke loudest. The way she greeted leaders from every kind of government with equal civility, how she received criticism with quiet composure, how she upheld protocol not as a barrier, but as a shared language. In this, she became a master of soft power. She never corrected, never scolded. Her response to discomfort was a gentle smile. Her answer to complexity was consistency. In times of global unrest, whether it was conflict abroad or political uncertainty at home, her role was never to direct policy, but to represent endurance. And she did so with quiet command. Her wardrobe, too, was part of this diplomatic vocabulary. Every color carefully chosen, not for fashion, but for symbolism and clarity. In foreign lands, she wore local fabrics and honored regional symbols. In mourning, she wore deepest black. In celebrations, she glowed in soft hues, like sunlight on water. Always noticeable, never ostentatious. Even her famed handbag, always neatly looped over one arm, was more than accessory. It was part of the unspoken rhythm of her engagement. Her posture, her walk, the gloved hand raised gently to wave, all these composed a kind of royal ballet that never faltered. She understood that to be effective in diplomacy, one must not dominate. One must witness, remember, respect. And so she listened, attentively, attentively, attentively. Every ambassador, every dignitary, every citizen who knelt or curtsied or shook her hand left feeling seen. She did not need to debate or persuade. Her influence came from being utterly herself, steady, kind, reserved. It was this restraint that gave her words greater weight when she did speak. And it was this unwavering composure that gave her presence a near timeless quality. In an era where news cycles spun rapidly and leaders often changed tone with the wind, Queen Elizabeth remained anchored. Her diplomacy was not an art of speech writing, but of character. She brought unity without declaring it, harmony without demanding it. Through all the decades, this quiet diplomacy earned her admiration from across the political and cultural spectrum. Nations that had once been colonies welcomed her with warmth. Rival powers acknowledged her with reverence. She embodied civility in its truest form, not performance, but principle. In the end, her legacy in diplomacy was not built on bold treaties or defining proclamations. It was built on trust, earned through presence, nurtured through stillness, and sealed through the language of unspoken grace. As the years moved on, Queen Elizabeth II did not fade quietly into the margins of her reign. Rather, she became more luminous, glowing not with youthful vigor, but with the gentle light of enduring presence. In her later decades, she no longer needed to prove or assert. Her authority was now woven into the fabric of the nation, not shouted, but assumed like the sky at dawn. Into her 80s and 90s, she maintained a schedule that would humble even younger public figures. Trooping the color, the state opening of Parliament, and ceremonies abroad continued with the same calm precision. Her posture remained erect, her gaze focused. Yet there was an added softness in her step, a mellowing of time that gave her presence even deeper warmth. Her face, once youthful and serene, was now marked with the lines of long service. But those lines were not burdens, they were testaments. Testaments to decades of listening, waiting, walking, waving, and remembering. Each furrow around her eyes seemed to carry echoes of speeches delivered, hands shaken, and moments quietly endured. Even as the royal family faced shifts and challenges, scandals, public scrutiny, the evolving roles of her children and grandchildren, Elizabeth remained a quiet axis. She did not waver in her responsibilities, nor did she allow change to rattle her core. Her steadiness became a comfort, especially to those who had known her image on coins, in classrooms, and across television screens for their entire lives. She embraced technology at her own pace, even appearing in digital broadcasts, Zoom calls, and online engagements. Always with the same measured tone, the same modest charm. Her 2020 televised message during the COVID-19 pandemic, delivered from within Windsor Castle, offered the same message she had always carried: reassurance, hope, and resolve. "We will meet again," she said simply. And with those words, hearts across a troubled world exhaled. Her relationship with the public deepened with time. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew, and their joy became her joy. She could be seen smiling more often, laughing more freely, especially with animals, with young ones, and during those moments when the crown felt less heavy and the woman beneath it shone more brightly. In 2021, the loss of her beloved Prince Philip marked a solemn chapter. Their marriage, spanning over 70 years, had been a quiet partnership of profound depth. His absence was felt deeply, though her composure never faltered. She continued, as she always had, with gentle perseverance. The Platinum Jubilee in 2022, marking 70 years on the throne, became a celebration not just of longevity, but of devotion. Tributes flowed not with pomp, but with gratitude. Across the Commonwealth, streets filled with light and song, not just for a monarch, but for a woman who had walked beside her people for a lifetime. Even as her public appearances grew less frequent, her influence never dimmed. Her face remained on stamps, her voice echoed in annual addresses, and her presence lingered like the hush that follows a lullaby. Elizabeth did not reign with fire or force. She reigned with presence, gentle, patient, enduring. And in the twilight of her reign, that light did not fade. It glowed, quiet and golden, like the final warmth of the setting sun. As time gently folded into memory, Queen Elizabeth II's legacy settled into place, not in the pages of politics, nor in the noise of history's great turning points, but in the quiet spaces in between. Hers was a reign defined not by singular acts, but by decades of quiet repetition, of showing up, standing still, and allowing the world to change around her while she held the line of tradition. Legacy for her was never a matter of rewriting the monarchy, but of preserving its meaning. In a world of flux, she offered familiarity. In times of triumph and tragedy, she remained. Through wars and weddings, abdications and jubilees, she was simply there, calm and composed, like a soft clock that never ceased to tick. To define her in political terms would be to miss the point. Her strength lay not in command, but in constancy. She did not lead nations into battle or craft laws. Instead, she became the quiet frame through which her nation viewed itself. Like a lighthouse standing still as waves crash and recede, she was a fixture not only in national identity, but in the hearts of generations. And yet, she was never distant. Her presence was woven into the everyday. On coins in pockets, in portraits on school walls, in news reports, on banknotes and postage stamps. She was a part of morning routines, of public ceremonies, of Christmas Day. Her image became so familiar, so ever-present, that it took on the softness of memory even while she lived. There is a kind of immortality in such stillness, one that doesn't shout for remembrance but simply becomes unforgettable. She embodied an idea that dignity matters, that silence can be powerful, and that grace, when lived consistently, can outlast the loudest headlines. Her life was never one of indulgence, though her surroundings were grand. Her days were filled with duties, audiences, briefings, and ceremonies. Yet never once did she step back. Never once did she declare fatigue. Her service was complete, not because of titles or wealth, but because she gave her life to the role entirely. She showed the world that quiet does not mean weak, that restraint is not indifference, and that tradition, when carried with compassion, can be a source of comfort. Her life became a bridge, linking past to present and present to future, with a kind of soft determination that required no applause. Now, as her reign rests in the hands of history, her legacy remains not in grand monuments, but in the gentle recollections of her people, in the feeling of calm she brought, in the way she listened without judgment, in the way she simply showed up again and again for 70 years. She leaves behind not just a monarchy, but a memory of poise, of kindness, of a woman who gave her life not for acclaim, but for something quieter and far more lasting. In the end, her legacy is stillness, and in that stillness, she will always remain. The night has grown deeper now. The stars, once shimmering with curiosity above our gentle path, now glow more softly, like memories resting quietly in the sky. And as we come to the end of our journey through the life of Queen Elizabeth II, we do so with a sense of reverence, not only for the years she lived, but for the way she lived them. She walked through history with footsteps that never hurried, never faltered. There were no sweeping proclamations or moments of thunder, just the steady cadence of a woman who knew her role, accepted it fully, and honored it completely. If you close your eyes now, you might imagine her again, standing beside a garden path in Balmoral, her scarf tied neatly beneath her chin, her coat gently folded at the wrists, the quiet earth beneath her feet. Perhaps there is a corgi nearby, trotting happily by her side. The morning air is cool, the sky pale with mist, and her breath forms soft clouds as she exhales into the silence of the countryside. Or picture her seated beside a fireplace, a woolen shawl around her shoulders, a letter or document resting neatly in her lap. She reads it not with haste, but with care, always with care. The flicker of the fire plays across her face, and in the golden glow, we see not just a monarch, but a woman, a daughter, a mother, a grandmother, a quiet leader of an ever-changing world. Throughout her life, Queen Elizabeth II taught us not by speaking loudly, but by speaking steadily, not by chasing attention, but by remaining centered. She showed us that strength can be soft, that devotion can be calm, and that the most lasting influence is sometimes that which is carried without need for recognition. As we drift now toward sleep, let those lessons linger gently. Let the calm she carried ripple into your breath, your body, your rest. You are not expected to be perfect or powerful, only present, only kind, only steady as she was. And so, in this quiet moment, we offer a final, whispered thanks to a life lived in the service of others. A life adorned not with gold or applause, but with quiet footsteps, steady, graceful, enduring. Let her presence soothe you now, like a lullaby passed down through generations. Let the hush of her legacy wrap around you like a soft blanket. And as your thoughts grow still, as the world falls quiet, know that her memory, like the stars above, will continue to shine calmly and without need for attention. Thank you for joining me on tonight's journey. I hope it brought you a little peace, a little wonder, and a little closer to rest. Until next time, sweet dreams.